Without objection, the chair may declare the subcommittee in recess at any point. Today's hearing will review the progress of the Coast Guard's Polar Security Cutter Acquisition Program. I now recognize myself for an opening statement. Today, we're reviewing the progress, frankly, the lack thereof, of the Coast Guard's Polar Security Cutter Program and discussing strategies to ensure the successful completion of this vital acquisition effort. This issue is of paramount importance. The United States must be able to operate effectively in the Arctic to safeguard our nation's security and strategic interests in this rapidly changing region. While the Arctic has long been a region of immense importance, it has recently become a key arena for geopolitical competition. As the ice retreats, new opportunities and challenges emerge, such as rising shipping traffic, untapped natural resources, and shifting national security dynamics. Nations around the globe are positioning themselves to capitalize on these immense opportunities. Of most concern are adversarial nations to the United States. For example, the People's Republic of China, which continues to pursue its self-declared near-Arctic ambitions, is rapidly expanding its icebreaker fleet to bolster its influence in the region. Recent reports indicate that China currently operates 4 icebreakers, with a 5th, named GD, which translates to polar in English, under construction and expected to be fully operational by 2025. Notably, construction of the GD began in November of 2022, and by the time it becomes fully operational next year, it will have been completed in under 30 months, 2.5 years. Meanwhile, Russia commands the world's largest and most advanced icebreaker fleet, consisting of 41 state-owned vessels, including 7 nuclear-powered icebreakers, which it uses to advance economic development and exert geopolitical influence. It is concerning that these two countries are actively working to dismantle both internal and bilateral political and bureaucratic barriers to strengthen their cooperation on Arctic issues. Most recently, China's Premier Li Yuan met with Russian Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin, and the two agreed to intensify their collaboration on Arctic matters, including shipping and polar vessel technology. By contrast, the United States has struggled to maintain even a minimal Arctic presence. The Coast Guard, our nation's primary operator in the Arctic, is reliant on just one aging heavy icebreaker, the Polar Star, which is already well past its intended service life, and a single medium icebreaker, the Healy. This is unacceptable. A nation as powerful, resourceful, and innovative as ours must rise to the challenge and do better. The Polar Security Cutter sought to address this critical capability gap, yet delays, cost overruns, and mismanagement have plagued the program from the start. Despite being announced in 2018, let me repeat that, despite being announced in 2018, we're no closer to having an operational Polar Security Cutter now than we were then. The first Polar Security Cutter was originally slated to be operational in, well, this year, 2024. However, based on current estimates, it will not enter service until 2030 at the earliest. Furthermore, the Coast Guard now estimates that the delivery of the first Polar Security Cutter will cost significantly more than originally anticipated, with the actual cost likely aligning more closely with the figures outlined in the Congressional Budget Office's The Cost of the Coast Guard's Polar Security Cutter report, released in August of 2024 in response to requests from Chairman Green and myself on this matter. Given the growing geopolitical importance of the Arctic, I am deeply concerned by this delay and cost overrun. The lack of progress on this program is a disservice to the women and men of the Coast Guard, who are tasked with executing the mission under increasingly challenging conditions. It also undermines our nation's ability to project power, uphold international norms, and compete in a region that will only grow more important in the years to come. As Vice Admiral Gautier stated to this committee in November of 2023, as a great nation, we need to be able to respond at the time and place of our desire, and the Coast Guard needs to advance and grow our assets in order to achieve that. While this situation has been frustrating, we can't afford to dwell on the past failures. Instead, we must focus on the path forward and ensure that the Coast Guard has the assets it needs to meet its mission in the polar regions and protect our national interests. I'm encouraged by my recent discussions with the Coast Guard, which have provided valuable insights into their ongoing efforts. It is evident that the Coast Guard is maintaining a strong collaborative relationship with the Bollinger shipyards, shipyards, working diligently to address key aspects of the program. Bollinger is making significant progress toward faithfully executing the PSC program while working with the Coast Guard to finalize the necessary contract modifications, which will formally establish new cost and schedule parameters. I'm cautiously optimistic about the direction these efforts are heading and the potential positive impact they could have on the Polar Security Cutters program ultimate success. I'm also excited about the direction the incoming administration may take in addressing the urgent need for U.S. icebreakers. The Trump administration has an opportunity to prioritize this issue and explore innovative solutions such as enhancing cooperations with allied nations to fill immediate capability gaps. These efforts, paired with a clear commitment to advancing our long-term Polar Security Cutter procurement plan, could significantly strengthen our polar capabilities while reinforcing U.S. leadership in these strategically vital regions. This hearing provides an opportunity to evaluate the status of the Polar Security Cutter, determine the necessary steps to sustain and expand recent progress, and looks to hold accountable those responsible for delivering this critical capability. Thank you to our witness, Vice Admiral Allan, for appearing before the subcommittee today to discuss this important topic. I look forward to your testimony. And now I'll yield to the ranking member for his opening statements.
Thank you, Chairman Jimenez, and for calling today's hearing, and thank you, Vice Admiral Allan, for joining us today. Today's hearing follows the hearing that this committee held in May to examine the Coast Guard's shipbuilding efforts and other acquisition programs. At that hearing, we discussed the importance of Arctic region to U.S. interests. In the Arctic, a changing climate and melting ice caps have allowed for increased shipping, energy exploration, economic competition, and power projection. Russia and China have amplified their presence in the region, including through joint military exercises. Yet the Coast Guard has been challenged to maintain a regular presence in the Arctic due to a lack of modern icebreakers. The Coast Guard has only one heavy icebreaker, the Polar Star, and one medium icebreaker, the Healy. The Coast Guard continues to carry out commendable projects to extend the service life of these cutters, but nevertheless, they are aging and insufficient to meet the Coast Guard's long-term needs. In 2016, the Coast Guard and the U.S. Navy jointly established the Polar Security Cutter, or PSC, program to begin the process of acquiring American-made heavy icebreakers. In 2019, the Coast Guard awarded a contract for the initial PSC to be delivered in late 2024. We are here in late 2024, and the Coast Guard is only now beginning to construction of the cutter. We understand some of the reasons for the delay, from underestimating the complexity of the ship design to the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic and impacts on supply chain. Some of these factors were under the Coast Guard's control and some were not. Going forward, the key is for the Coast Guard to learn from the past and establish reasonable schedule, cost estimate for the PSC program, and then stick to them. Doing so will allow Congress to plan for the budgetary demands of the PSC program and continue our bipartisan support. I look forward to receiving an update from Vice Admiral Allan today on the next phase of the PSC program. I also look forward to hearing more details on the Coast Guard's plan for the commercially available icebreaker it recently acquired to help fill icebreaking needs while we await the delivery of the first PSC. The Coast Guard's mission in the Arctic is critical, and we must ensure the service deploys the capabilities it needs. Vice Admiral, thank you again for being here, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Thanadar. Other members of the committee are reminded that opening statements may be submitted for the record. I'm pleased to have a distinguished witness before us today on this critical topic. I ask that our witness please rise and raise his right hand. You solemnly swear that the testimony you will give before the Committee on Homeland Security of the United States House of Representatives will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Let the record reflect that the witness has answered in the affirmative. Thank you, and please be seated. I would now like to formally introduce our witness. Vice Admiral Allan serves as the Deputy Commandant for Mission Support for the United States Coast Guard. Thank you, Vice Admiral Allan, for being here today. You're now recognized for 5 minutes to summarize your opening statements.
Good morning, Chairman Jimenez, Ranking Member Thanadar, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. I'm pleased to be here to update you on the ongoing efforts to recapitalize the nation's fleet of polar icebreakers. I ask that my written testimony be entered into the record.
Without objection.
The Coast Guard is a unique instrument of national power, supporting national security and strategic objectives around the globe. We are working hard to meet growing mission needs in Arctic and Antarctica. The polar regions are experiencing an ever-increasing rate of change, requiring systems of assets and infrastructure to enable Coast Guard operations in some of the harshest and most remote environments on Earth. As Deputy Commandant for Mission Support, I am focused on delivering solutions that equip our people with assets, tools, and support which will ensure U.S. presence and mission capability in the high latitudes. With the strong support of this subcommittee, the service is prioritizing acquisitions and modernization programs to meet national demands. I'm clear-eyed about this challenge we face in recapitalizing the nation's fleet of polar icebreakers. Put simply, polar icebreakers are the foundation for U.S. operational surface presence and influence in the polar regions. Polar Security Cutter is the best and quickest way to provide the multi-mission heavy polar icebreaking capability the nation needs to deliver assured, year-round access and to meet national and homeland security mission demands in the high latitudes. The Coast Guard is working with the U.S. Navy as part of an integrated program office to design and deliver at least 3 heavy icebreakers we call the Polar Security Cutters. Navy support is critical as the U.S. seeks to construct its first heavy polar icebreaker in nearly 50 years, at a time when the demand for new maritime assets exceed national shipbuilding capabilities. Together, the Coast Guard and Navy are collaborating with Bollinger, Mississippi Shipbuilding to build the first Polar Security Cutter. Alongside our partners in the Maritime Industrial Base, we are working to address the unique challenges of producing a large, complex ship like the Polar Security Cutter. We are nearing the end of a long and complex process to modify the contract, formalize costs, and schedule requirements before production activities can begin. Thanks to your enormous efforts from dedicated people, I am very pleased to report that we are on track for a production decision from the Department of Homeland Security this week. As we work to advance the acquisition of the Polar Security Cutter, we are also executing service life extension activities on Coast Guard Cutter Polar Star, which departed Seattle for its annual deployment to Antarctica in support of Operation Deep Freeze. We are planning a major maintenance availability on the Coast Guard Cutter Healy, and we just awarded a contract to acquire the United States' only commercially available polar icebreaker as part of our Arctic bridging strategy. The physical, operational, and geopolitical environment near the poles is changing rapidly. Our presence in these regions has shaped national security in high latitudes for over 150 years and is central to the U.S. whole-of-government approach to securing and preserving our national interests. Continued support for modernized, capable polar fleet, along with increased Coast Guard capability and capacity in general, will fortify the nation's position in the critical Arctic and Antarctic domains. Coast Guard presence and leadership is essential to maintaining a coalition of like-minded partners to ensure these regions remain peaceful, stable, prosperous, and cooperative. I appreciate the subcommittee's continued bipartisan support, and I look forward to our continued work together on advancing these vital efforts in the high latitudes. Thank you for your time on this important matter today, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Vice Admiral Allan, for being here today. Thank you for being here, and I'll recognize myself for 5 minutes of questioning. Everybody else will be by order. We'll have our shots at you. Vice Admiral, how long have you been in your position?
I've been in this position since June of this year.
And your predecessor, how long was that person in your position?
He was in there 3 years before,
3 years. And the person before that?
2 years before that.
2 years before that. And so, in 2 years, 3 years, and you've been there 1 year? Half a year?
Yes, sir. Coming up on 1 year.
A year? Okay. So in 6 years, they've had 3 people in that position. Are you in charge of all the acquisitions for ships, et cetera, in the Coast Guard?
Yes, sir.
Is this billet in charge of acquisitions, et cetera, for all the ships in the Coast Guard?
Say that last part
I'm
again.
saying, is this position, the one that you hold, okay?
Yes, sir.
Is that the one position that's in charge of all the acquisitions, et cetera, for the people in the Coast Guard, the ships, et cetera, in the Coast Guard?
Yes, sir. So I oversee all the workings of it. The Vice Commandant is the acquisition executive.
And so in 6 years, we've had 3 people. It's not much continuity,
Yes, sir.
okay? How about the people underneath you? How long do they stay there, normally?
So, sir, we are made up of military and civilians, so a lot of our civilians have been there for long periods of time. Our military flags rotate every 2 years. Our lower than the flags are about 3 to 4 years.
So, Admiral, the one thing that I have a big problem with, huge problem with, is our icebreakers, is this something new? Nobody's ever invented one? Nobody's ever built one before?
Last time we built one in the United States was...
No, I'm not saying us. I'm saying, is it something new, brand new? Nobody's ever heard of an icebreaker before. We're inventing a new wheel.
So, sir, I'd say when you talk about that, there's a lot of differences in icebreakers from the heavy to the ones that are breaking harbor ice. So you could almost think of it as an escort to the Ford 350.
None of our allies operate heavy icebreakers?
Canada actually is looking to build a heavy icebreaker, yes, sir.
They don't operate one?
They operate one, yes. Sir.
Okay. The Finns, they operate any icebreakers?
I do not think they operate any heavy icebreakers, but they operate a lot of icebreakers in and around the Fords.
My frustration, Admiral, is 6 years since this program has been authorized, and we still don't have a final design. I mean, it only took us 9 years to get to the moon.
Yes, sir.
Okay? So I just don't, I don't see how there's any excuse for that, to be honest with you. I don't care about anything else. You may have picked the wrong shipyard, and maybe they had problems, and you have to go somewhere else, and then there's another contract and all that. But during that time, your ship should have been designed.
Right. So, sir, I would say to your point, I'm not here to offer you any excuses because excuses are always bad. What I'm here to talk to you a little bit about is we are at that final phases of design, and we are ready to move forward.
I think the reason I asked you about how many people have had your position and how often they change,
Yes, sir.
because there's an aura of plausible deniability. There's nobody to be held accountable. I want to know, hey, who is that individual that failed to design this ship? Who is that?
You can blame me, sir.
How can I blame you? You weren't here in 2018.
I'm working with that.
You've been here for a year, and yet I can't blame the person before you because that person was only there 3 years, right? Maybe I'll blame that person, okay? Or about the person before that?
I think what we're looking to do, sir, is show you that we've learned, that we've moved forward, and that we have the opportunity to build a polar security cutter, a heavy icebreaker, by 2030.
I think the point I'm trying to make is not just about the Coast Guard. This is the problem with our entire defense industry and the entire. And I know you're not the Pentagon, all right?
Right, sir.
But the way that we procure things, the way that we construct things, the Chinese, I just gave you the example that there will be from construction to delivery is 2.5 years. We haven't even finished design, and we're now waiting another 5 years at least until we get this icebreaker. Why would it take the Chinese 2.5 years to build an icebreaker, and us it takes 5 years plus another 6 years for the design, 11 years to put something in operation on an area as critical as the Arctic. The Russians, you know, they already have 41 icebreakers running around. We're lucky to have 2. This, you know, there's something wrong here, okay? And, you know, I told you, you know, Admiral, that I wasn't gonna be kind because there is nothing to be kind about. This is unacceptable, especially the security risk that this poses to the United States and the procurement methodology and the way this is going. This is just totally unacceptable. So, you know, maybe on my second round of questioning, I'll ask what you're going to do about it and what's going to happen. But my time has expired. I now recognize the ranking member from Michigan, Mr. Thanadar.
Thank you, Chairman. And I do share some of your concerns and your frustrations. I understand. I'm glad to hear that the Coast Guard has made progress in its efforts to construct the first PSC. I understand the Coast Guard expects to negotiate contract modifications in the near future to formally establish new cost and schedule parameters for the construction of the cutter. These parameters are intended to keep the contractors on track, but realistically, if there is a breach of the contract, it would be difficult to pull support for the program while construction is underway. What assurance can you provide Congress that the Coast Guard and its contractor will abide by the new cost and schedule parameters once they are agreed to?
Sir, thank you for the question. You know, as we talk about where we're going with this and what we have in place, we have a lot through the federal acquisitions processes to make sure that we are tracking every step of the way to make sure we understand how they're progressing on their model, how they're building, and when we can make payments once they've completed certain milestones. I would tell you, when we start talking about Bollinger, Mississippi Shipyard, we within the Coast Guard have watched them deliver our FRCs. They're at number 68, and those are coming off the line with almost zero discrepancies. They also delivered our 87. So we worked with Bollinger before. We know the quality. We know the people. We're talking to the people down there in Mississippi, and it's amazing to see the patriotic nature that's coming out of them as they look for new ways to evolve and build a cutter that hasn't been built in 50 years in this nation.
What remedies will the Coast Guard have if there are further delays or cost overruns in the future?
So, sir, every step along the way, we have not only meetings within the Coast Guard to make sure that we're tracking progress and to see how they're doing that. We provide quarterly briefs up here to the Hill, and then we also provide quarterly and annual briefs up to the DHS. We're working to ensure that we have good continuity on where we are and where we're at. I think with all the work that's been done, especially in the last year with design and some prefabbed sections of the ship to help the shipbuilder learn, we are on a good track to that when we begin construction, we'll have something that we can actually report right away. So we're working to make sure that here at the beginning, we are going to be on a road for success right from the start.
And now that the Coast Guard has taken possession of the ship, what are the biggest hurdles to deploying it quickly? Is there anything that can be done to expedite its deployment?
So, sir, when you try to build a vessel like the heavy polar icebreaker, it's going to take time. We think it's going to take all those 5 years. What we are trying to do is figure out how we fill that gap. And I think with the help of Congress, we are. So 2 things that we are doing, we're certainly, we've had a midlife renewal of the Coast Guard Polar Star that's on its way to Antarctica. We're looking to do the same thing for Healy to keep them in service and meeting the operations we need. We also did a search, and we came up with the only U.S. commercially available icebreaker, the IVIC, and we are putting that into service, as you mentioned in your open statement. In fact, we look to do that by the end of this week, and then we will actually begin to move that to its final home port in Juneau, Alaska, with a temporary berthing location sometime this summer. In addition to those things, what we're doing during the summer when the ice is receding a bit, we're putting our national security cutters, we're putting our helicopters, and we're putting our fixed-wing aircraft up in there to increase the presence and provide protection for our sovereignty in the Arctic.
Now, you had a previous contractor, right, with a contract that didn't deliver. What's the current contractor like, and what is their estimate of the cost compared to the last contract?
So, sir, I think the other contractor sold out to Bollinger, Mississippi. They took the contract and the shipyard. Bollinger, Mississippi has done a lot of things to make that right, but they feel like a lot of the labor required was underestimated. So to your question, we think this is going to cost in and around the amount that the CBO estimated in their report this past summer.
So is this 50% higher than the last contract, or 20% higher? What is it?
It's about 50% higher, sir, but we're still negotiating that, and we'll finalize those negotiations in January.
All right, thank you, Admiral.
Yes, sir.
Thank you to the ranking member. I now recognize the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Higgins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Admiral, thank you for being here with us today. How are your men, sir? The men under your command? How they doing as we're moving into this Christmas season and under the leadership of your new position, relatively new? You've just been there a few months. How are your men?
Sir, thank you for asking about that. Our teams are incredibly resilient. We've had some tough years. We are watching some of our assets kind of deteriorate, and we're working hard to get them new ones. But again, I think if you look back in their year review of the nation, from the Key Bridge failure to lots of search and rescues, our teams have gone out, and our teams like hard work. They like tough jobs, and I think they're doing well. Thank you very much for asking.
Yes, sir. I've always been struck by the professionalism of the men and women of the Coast Guard, and in my humble estimation, your most valuable asset are those men and women. Deteriorating ships are a significant consideration, but they're of minor importance if you have deteriorating men and women. So I believe we're entering a new era. The incoming Trump administration and the slim majority of Republican control in the House, and a unified government with Republicans that are committed to helping the Coast Guard in both chambers of Congress and the White House. I believe there'll be a new emphasis on restoring our maritime assets to achieve our national security goals, and the importance of the role that the Coast Guard plays can really not be overstated. So the polar regions offer particular challenges for Coast Guard patrol and operations, clearly because of ice and the incredibly challenging conditions of traversing the sea in the polar regions. So the delays that you have faced that have been caused by sort of failures to navigate through maneuvering authorities within the Coast Guard and the means by which your designs move forward, contracting challenges. We fully expect that you and your team will address those things, and I'm here to reassure you that that you're going to have a Congress and a White House that's going to fully support Coast Guard operations, including in the crucial polar regions. So I have an optimistic view of these things because I know my shipbuilders, and they're a bunch of badasses, and they get the job done. And I need my office to be in regular communication with you, good sir, and your office. Before the Christmas season is over, your office will receive a letter from my office outlining the contact data from my senior staff that's assigned to help the Coast Guard in all matters and prioritizing the projects that we see partnering with in the coming years under your command. Regarding the procurement from small shipyards impacted by inflationary measures, this is some area you could really help, and I'd like you to answer this question, please. In what ways can you envision the Coast Guard to improve the means by which you synchronize your response to the requirements and requests of ERAs, equitable adjustments, the impacts of inflation, supply chain interruption, workforce interruption, et cetera? Can you please address how you plan to handle that?
Yes, sir. Thank you for that question. I would say two things. When we start to look at our industrial base of this nation, we're not going to be able to solve the problems that we have in this industrial base one contract at a time, whether that's Navy, whether that's Coast Guard, or whether that's commercial. We need to make sure we're investing within those within those small shipyards and large shipyards to get that industrial base. The second thing I'd say is when you look at that, because we haven't invested, we look at some of these individual contracts and prices skyrocketing when the maritime inflation rate over the last 4 years equals what it was the previous 20 years. So there has been a lot of cost escalation in there. That said, we need contractors that are willing to build tough and complex ships. And if we're not willing to give them an equitable adjustment when they understand what it takes to build and make those, then we are not going to have those shipyards around to help us out. So, yes, sir, we are looking at that equitable adjustment.
Thank you, Admiral. You can consider me and my office at your avail, and we'll partner in the coming years, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, gentleman from Louisiana. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from New York, Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you, Chairman Jimenez and Ranking Member Thanedar for hosting this hearing on polar ice cutting. Vice Admiral Allan, thank you for being here, for your testimony, for your service to our country. Marine commerce in the Great Lakes is vital, with tens of millions of metric tons moved across the Great Lakes and hundreds of thousands of jobs that are supported here in the United States. In the winter months, like these months we're in today, the ice forms up on the Great Lakes. It gets in the way of commerce. It disrupts supply chains. It poses safety risks to vessels. And it's a disruptive force, especially in shallow lakes like Lake Erie, which my community that I live in the district that I represent, directly abuts, along with Lake Ontario. And the Great Lakes region really relies upon these icebreakers, these ice cutters. Without these icebreakers, our economy takes a massive hit, and it's concerning that the fleet has significantly aged and has actually been depleted from 20 ships down to 11 ships currently. As you know, there was a decrease in funding that was asked for from $55 million ultimately to what was allocated to $20 million. Can you talk about the risk that's posed by that $35 million shortfall for the icebreaker program?
Yes, sir. So when you start talking about the Coast Guard cutter Mackinac, we almost referred to her as one of our newer cutters, but she's 20 years old, and she is the only cutter that's providing the kind of cuts within the Great Lakes that'll allow those big ore ships to move and keep commerce going. We also have a system of ships between our 225-foot buoy tenders and our 148-foot ice-breaking tugs. And that system provides some capability for us in what we would call milder winters. If we get into heavy winters, we would probably need to meet the demands of that 2 Mackinac-like icebreakers. Right now, we have good relationships with Canada, and Canada has some bigger icebreakers in there, and we work with them to keep that ice cleared because they have some of the same challenges. But to your point, we needed $55 million to get the new icebreaker ready and headed towards where we need to establish a program office and start design. We got $20 million.
Thank you.
We're short.
Thank you. You're short. What would $55 million accomplish?
So, sir, it would stand up our program office. We're already doing some things on indicative design for what a icebreaker up in the Great Lakes would look like, but it would allow us to push that forward, and it would allow us to get ready to have a design so that we could start to go towards not only indicative design, but an awarded contract for final design and build.
And let me be clear, this is the Great Lakes. I'm talking about Lake Erie, Lake Ontario, fed through Canada, the Welland Canal, up through the St. Lawrence Seaway, out to the Atlantic. This is shipping for the entire eastern seaboard and northeast of the United States into the Midwest. This has a tremendous impact on our national economy, and it needs to be resolved. There have been funds that have been authorized and appropriated for construction of a new icebreaker, but haven't passed the first hurdle yet for approval. What's causing the delay?
So, sir, we were asked to start a program office by January 1st of 2025, and we will have that in place. It'll be a small office that begins to take that indicative design, which we took some risk at going at with Coast Guard resources, but we'll be able to build on that to get to where you're talking about, to be able to provide that kind of icebreaking for the Great Lakes.
Well, I appreciate that, and I urge Congress and the United States Coast Guard to prioritize modernizing and expanding the fleet of icebreakers for the Great Lakes. Additional icebreakers for the Great Lakes are absolutely essential to move our economy, to grow our economy, for economic vitality throughout our entire nation, as I've mentioned already. So we're looking forward to working with you to get this program fully funded and to expedite the implementation, the construction and implementation of these icebreakers. Chairman, I yield back.
The gentleman from New York yields back. I now recognize another gentleman from New York, Mr. Laloda.
Not enough New Yorkers on Homeland Security, Chairman. But thank you for hosting this meeting. Admiral, how are you, sir?
Really good, thank you.
Admiral, is the United States a maritime nation?
It is absolutely a maritime nation, and our GDP relies on those goods that are flowing into the country.
Perfect answer. Is being a maritime nation important to both our strategic military interests as well as our economic interests, Admiral?
Absolutely. It provides us strategic advantages, not only for what we're doing for security of this nation, but the economics that move in and out everywhere from into the heartland, into those things heading overseas and into our ports.
And as part of being a successful maritime nation include having a presence in the Arctic?
It absolutely does, because again, we have 50 states. Alaska is up there, and Alaska is a border state with the Arctic that has waters that are being, where we have PRC and Russians, we know are operating in some of our EZ, economic exclusive zones.
And Admiral, to be successful in the Arctic, is it necessary to have icebreakers?
Yes.
And how many icebreakers do we have?
We have one heavy icebreaker, the Polar Star. We have a medium icebreaker, the Healy, and we just purchased the old IVEC that we will be renaming the Storis when we take it over and commission it this summer.
Does that make it 3, Admiral?
Yes, sir.
And exactly how many icebreakers does China have?
China has right now 4, and they're in construction for 2.
And how about Russia?
Russia has 55 with construction for 10.
So 3 for us, 4 for China. You said 55 for Russia?
Yes, sir.
How would you describe the operational capability of our icebreakers?
So I would say the operational capability of the Polar Star, it was built in the early 70s. We've had to refurbish that. It was supposed to be good for a life of about 30 years. So we are now up to almost 50 years with that. It is providing what we need. It's breaking 19 feet of ice. It's going to go into McMurdo and be able to resupply it, and it will be able to do that on its own. It's got the capabilities we need. The newer icebreakers won't be, will break ice in a different way, but it'll be even more effective with new hull designs and engines.
And on the Chinese 4, how would you describe their operational capability?
So I would tell you that they are trying to build heavy icebreakers like we have. They have heavier icebreakers, but right now they're down in Antarctica with 2, and they need 2 for self-rescue.
And on the 55 Russian ones, how would you describe those?
So they have 7 heavy icebreakers, including some that are nuclear powered. They have certainly a lot of coasts and ports that they're clearing on that Northeast Passage to have their own commerce pole, but they've got a tremendous icebreaking capability.
So we have 3, the Chinese have 4, the Russians have 55. Would you agree that the Russians and the Chinese, at least collectively, have a greater ice-breaking capability in the Arctic than we do?
I would.
And what are we going to do about that, Admiral?
So I think we are going to do 2 things. We are going to deliver to the nation this polar security cutter that we are working right now with Bollinger, Mississippi shipyards to do in 2030. Right after that, with the help of Congress and funding, because we need funding if we are going to invest in the Arctic and Antarctic, we will build 2 more that will roll off those lines at 2 years after each other. So we will have a total of 3 of those by the year 2034. In addition, we've always said that for us to be capable of operating there, we need 8 to 9 icebreakers, at least 3 heavies. So we also need to look at how we fill the rest of that gap that we know is standing by.
If we get to the 8 or 9, will we be still inferior to our adversaries? Will we be on par, or will we be superior with the 8 or 9, our ice-breaking capabilities compared to theirs?
So based upon the ports that we have up there and the activity that we're seeing, we are focused on sovereignty of our waters. And we think through a bunch of different studies and strategic looks that 8 to 9 will provide us that capability that we need to project sovereignty and protect our resources.
I only have about 30 seconds left, Admiral, but what other capabilities do you require in order to have strategic dominance in the Arctic?
So I think the Commandant would tell you that we are a $12 million organization. We need to be a $20 million organization to fulfill the duties that the nation's asking us to do it. Included in that, we would need that by 2033. Right now, we are a $1.2 billion capital-intensive organization. We need to be at $3.4 billion immediately to provide cutters, aircraft, helicopters, ships, and shore infrastructure to support what the nation deserves.
Thanks, Admiral. I yield.
Thank you, gentlemen from New York. I'm going to have a second round of questionings. And so, Admiral, what has the Coast Guard learned? What have you all learned?
Sorry, I'm sorry. I'm having a head cold today. I didn't hear your last question there.
I'm going to change my question.
Yes, sir.
I see a number of officers behind you. Are they part of the mission support staff?
Yes, sir. So my command master chief, head of all enlisted personnel for DCMS, Master Chief Ingham's with him. I've got an aide that tries to keep me on schedule, and then 2 others that are doing program reviews to make sure we're spending our dollars and resources where they need to be.
What's your average stay in mission support?
One more time, I'm
In
sorry.
other words, how long do they stay in mission support?
So most,
For uniformed people, how long do they stay in mission support?
So myself and Master Chief will stay about 2 years. Everyone else will be about 3 to 4 years.
Okay. So the thing that's constant is basically your civilian staff?
Yes, sir. I was just going to say our civilian staff is that vital piece that keeps continuity from our SESs to those people at the ground floor that are doing a lot of the work on design.
Is there a head of that civilian staff? Or somebody, the head person, head civilian person there?
So, yes, sir. What we do is we identify one of our senior civilians to represent the civilians on our leadership council. He's been on that council for over 20 years.
But that's the only constant that you have in that section?
So all the civilians, but yes, sir. So he's one. Yes, sir.
Right. and the uniform people rotate through.
Yes, sir.
Do you think that's a problem?
Sir, I would tell you that when you go out and you design ships, it's good to know what you're designing them for, so to understand how they operate, what's required. I think there's a close connection that the service has provided over a long period of time to show how operators are helping to bring the right capabilities to the service. So, yes, sir, I think there is value. You're right. We have some lift to do to get everyone back up to the same level when we do rotations, but that's why we have our civilian staff, especially within Acquisitions Directorate.
But the civilians, okay, I mean, yeah, but the civilians report to you.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, so again, my concern about the entire operation is that the design issue, that you're 6 years and still hasn't been designed. I don't see how you can justify that, to be honest with you. But so I'm trying to get to the bottom of maybe you have there's an issue here, because you just don't design polar cutters. You're designing cutters. You're designing all kinds of probably procuring aircraft and everything, right?
Yes, sir.
You do mission support. So,
Correct.
my colleague from Louisiana was very eloquent in saying that you need the men and women of the Coast Guard are the most important thing.
Yes, sir.
But we owe them. We owe them. We owe them. And here's what we owe. We owe them, and we must make sure that they're equipped. They're the best equipped Coast Guard in the world. Mm-hmm. And so, in your estimation, are we failing in that mission, or are we actually succeeding in that mission, keeping our Coast Guard and women equipped with the best equipment in the world?
Sir, I would say, going back to what the Commandant said, we need to be a $20 billion organization to meet the nation's need. We are watching as we have crumbling infrastructure. We are watching as we are decommissioning ships because we can no longer maintain them. We're watching as we try to keep helicopters longer than anyone else, and we can't maintain them, so they are taking themselves out of commission. So, no, sir, I don't think we are delivering to the Coast Guard men and women the assets that they need to be successful. We are delivering to them the assets that they are making the nation successful in by hard work and long hours.
Well, hopefully I'll stay on this subcommittee for the next year and next 2 years, and I will have more in-depth conversations with you about the needs and the shortfalls. And I believe that we owe it to our men and women that are putting there and risking their lives every single day to protect America. We need to make sure that they have the right equipment and the best equipment because that's what we owe them. All right. And so, with that, I'll yield the remainder of time. I now recognize the ranking member, Mr. Thanedar.
Vice Admiral, just a quick question here. Don't want to take all of my 5 minutes here, but I'm trying to really understand. I'm a business person. I ran small businesses for many, many years. Planning is important to survive in small business. Cost controls are important to be able to get things done efficiently, under cost, in time. It looks like, something terribly went wrong here in terms of cost estimation, in terms of planning, designing. What have we learned? How can we go forward and have a sense or feeling that we're going to accomplish our mission? Do we understand enough about what went wrong and how we're going to address that issues?
Sir, thanks for that question. I think when you look at this, we have to be a learning organization, and we have to come to you when we're having problems with too much oversight or too many red tape. That said, when you look at this polar security cutter and what it's doing, and I'd love to get both of you down there to see the unique problem set with this. We just went through an OPC, the Offshore Patrol Cutter. It has 17 modules, I'm sorry, to make it into a ship. This one has 85 modules. It's going to be as big as some of the landing craft that the Navy has. It is a very complex ship. Now you take 2-inch steel and you try to mold that around the hull, that takes time. But to your point, we could have done better. I think we've learned things now that if we put into place, we are going to do better. I'm watching that through our WCCs, which is our Waterways Commerce Cutter, and how fast that's moving, not only in final design, but getting ready to be built and bird on. I'm looking at how Austal has taken our OPC design and quickly moving in about an 18-month process to have production design and be able to start rolling those off. So we are learning, we will continue to do it, but I will tell you, this has been a very complex and difficult cutter to build.
Has this contractor built a cutter like this before?
So when you go into this, we had VT Halter was the ones that won the initial contract. They had, I'm not sure on their history on what we're doing, but again, this is a very complex cutter, something difficult, something that we haven't done before. We are very happy to be working with Bollinger, Mississippi shipyards, who have a proven track record and who are excited about this opportunity. Went down and got to meet with a guy named Sean, who walked us around the shipyard. He is taking and showing how we're doing new welding designs down there that have never been attempted with this thick of a steel before. They are incredible people, and I think we got the right people for the job.
Well, your men and women in Coast Guard, I've been there, I've visited, I've been on the ships. I've seen them work so hard, and it's not an easy job. So I understand, and it's important that they have the right tools for them to do their job. So I wish you well. Thank you. I know you're in the job for only a few months, but I think it's so critical that we stay on top of this and things go according to plan now, because we need the tools they need the tools to do their job. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you to the ranking member. I thank the witness for their valuable testimony and the members for their questions. The members of the subcommittee may have some additional questions for the witness, and we would ask the witnesses to respond to those in writing. Pursuant to Committee Rule 7D, the hearing record will be held open for 10 days without objection. This subcommittee stands adjourned.